possible connection between Donald Trump and a Russian bank during the 2016 election went all the way to then FBI Director James Comey, who you see in the middle box there. That is according to the key witness in the Sussman trial. The FBI's former top lawyer, James Baker, testified that he briefed Comey and his deputy about this tip that came in from Sussman, and, quote, I think they were quite concerned about it. Victor Davis Hanson is standing by with his take on all of this, but first to correspondent David Spott, get us caught up on what's going on today in what is an ever-evolving, fascinating story inside that D.C. courtroom. Hi, David.
Hi, Martha. It really is fascinating. And listen, there are a lot of names and a lot of details in this case, but at the end of the day, this case is really about just one charge, making a false statement to the FBI. James Baker currently still on the stand. I say that he took the stand late yesterday, and he rejoined that testimony this morning at 9 a.m. He's expected to go through the rest of the day. We have some video of Baker entering the federal courthouse this morning, the gentleman with the white hair and glasses getting ready to walk in before his testimony. He was the top attorney at the FBI in September 2016 when defendant Michael Sussman, at the time a Hillary Clinton campaign attorney, texted him on a Sunday night. Despite saying they were friends for years and in, quote, frequent contact, Baker says he was surprised that Sussman had his personal cell phone number. Sussman wrote, Jim, it's Michael Sussman. I have something time-sensitive and sensitive I need to discuss. Do you have availability for a short meeting tomorrow? I'm coming on my own, not on behalf of a client or company. Want to help the Bureau? Thanks. Well, Sussman went to the FBI the next day and told Baker he had evidence of a secret back channel via a computer server between Alpha Bank, which is connected to the Kremlin, and the Trump Organization. Baker says that Sussman warned him the New York Times was aware of the allegations and was just days away from publishing a front-page story. Baker says he never asked Sussman how the New York Times got the information. Baker says he made the allegations a high priority because of the impending story. He also told jurors that Sussman dropped off paperwork and 2 thumb drives. The FBI investigated, and Baker says there was nothing there. Martha, he told jurors he wanted to get this off of his desk and get it to agents. He's an attorney. Also, he specifically was asked multiple times, and I do say more than a dozen times, if Michael Sussman was coming on behalf of a client, because the government says that he billed the Hillary Clinton campaign for that meeting with the FBI. Sussman says he was coming on his own, as you saw in that text message. Well, there was a transcript from a prior interview done a couple of years ago with Baker where he used the word clients, plural, when talking about Michael Sussman. But when asked about it multiple times, Baker says he misspoke. It was a mistake, and he moved on, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it is simply about that false statement charge, Martha.
Very interesting. David, thank you. David Spott. Let's bring in Victor Davis Hanson, author of The Dying Citizen, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution and a National Review Institute fellow. Victor, great to have you with us today. So, over the course of this story, we've heard a lot about James Baker, the lead counsel at the FBI, and James Comey, and Peter Strzok, and Michael Sussman, who, desperately said he wanted to make sure the FBI had this information that they had found, and 2 thumb drives he dropped off and some documents. What do you make of where these people are sort of positioning themselves right now in this courtroom?
I think they're trying to position themselves that in a 360-degree method, they're going to be challenged by people they used to be friends with and work with. By that I mean that Mr. Joff's narratives and Mr. Sussman's narratives and probably Mr. Baker's narratives, probably Mr. Elias's narratives are mutually contradictory. Because what really happened was Mr. Sussman, through a firewall, was working for Hillary Clinton, as was Mr. Elias, and they coordinated an effort to find some evidence of Russian collusion. They found none, so they contacted one of the most esteemed cybersecurity experts in the United States, Mr. Joff. Remember, he had bragged that if Hillary Clinton was going to be elected, he was going to get the top spot. So they knew he was sympathetic to their cause. He said he would check. He had access to the internal communications coming in and out of Donald Trump. He came back and said, that looks like maybe the Alpha Bank is communicating. That was enough for Mr. Sussman, who was, by the way, Martha, a cyber security expert lawyer. They went to the FBI. and they misled the FBI apparently, and then he went to the CIA, and this is what the key case is, I think. The CIA and the FBI, who had known their reputations, especially Mr. Joff, and had high regard and worked for them in the past, said this is entirely bogus, and we can't use it. So that the interesting question is, how do people with such sterling reputations bring evidence that they insist shows that this fraud that was fraudulent? We know it was fraudulent. It was just spam. But why would they think that was accurate enough to take it to the FBI and the CIA, who were sympathetic to them and had worked with them in the past? And it didn't take long for the FBI and the CIA to say this is bogus. So that begs the question, were they trying to peddle information that they knew was inaccurate? In other words, to fool the FBI and the CIA, at least for a while, to investigate it so then they could leak to the New York Times, Washington Post, and say, look, there's a story coming out. The FBI and the CIA are investigating Donald Trump's communications with an Alpha bank.
Yeah,
And
I mean, there's
think
so
that's
much
what
here about the
case is right now
coordination
boiling down
between
to.
all of these players and how that story ended up being printed. And we also remember James Comey going and telling then candidate Trump, I just want you to know there's some information coming out. And that was all from the dossier, the dirty dossier as it came to be known, which turned out to be just riddled with holes as well. One of the big questions though that a lot of people have, Mark Elias worked very closely with the Clintons for years, was there awareness in the Clinton office, in the front office, or by Hillary Clinton, of what was going on here? And I thought it was very interesting that Mark Elias yesterday basically tried to say, I hired this Oppo team and I made sure that anything that they were handling, basically it was between, us and them, these transactions. I didn't let it go any higher than that. What did you think of that?
I don't think it's going to be persuasive. He was Hillary Clinton's personal lawyer. He was the DNC lawyer. He was the connection between Perkins Coie. He was the one that got his former Perkins Coie associate, Michael Sussman, involved. And that led eventually to the Fusion GPS and eventually Christopher Steele. So their stories are not mutually compatible. And I think what Mr. Durham, unlike Mr. Mueller, is starting at the bottom. He's not going after Hillary Clinton. He's simply going one step at a time and seeing if these people will tell the same story. And they're not. But eventually, through GPS, through Perkins Coie, through the DNC, you get back to the Clinton campaign and ultimately Hillary Clinton herself. The problem is, that I see it, is that you have a very ambiguous judge who was appointed by Barack Obama, Judge Cooper, and you have a DC jury. So
yeah, exactly.
I think that there's going to be it's going to be very difficult.
And they have a very.
Mr. Durham is a very high professional. He hasn't leaked. Yeah. He hasn't had press conferences. He's just the antithesis of the Mueller investigation. So it's going to be very careful. He's working all the way up, and we'll see what happens.
We will see what happens. Thank you, Victor. Great to have you with us today.
Thank you.